You and I are going to make something beautiful today. For today's Tutorial Tuesday, we're making some lovely rings. Many months ago, I did a tutorial on another style of rings, and this is sort of similar with more of an airy, open look, still just as easy. And I'll show you all the easy steps with just a few simple tools that you will be able to accomplish these wonderful little rings. I'll also be showing you some of the pitfalls that I ran into, what worked and didn't work, so that you can be successful maybe on your first try. A simple length of 12 inches of 18 gauge is going to make this lovely ring. I've already obviously have a piece cut here. And tools that we're going to be needing. You're going to need 2 chain nose pliers. Really helps to get a good grip on this ring as we're tying in loose ends. You're going to need flush cutters. You're going to need nylon hammer, and definitely, we're making rings, you're going to need a ring mandrel or something similar so that you can form your ring. And I always have my bail pliers. Gather all your supplies. Let's make this wonderful ring today. My hair is getting in my way. I'm going to use this hairpin that we made several weeks ago to tie my hair back. If you were interested in something to tie your hair back with, check out that tutorial as well. Okay, so first we need to talk about the bead that you are going to choose. And let me run through some of the things that didn't work. This one is with a 6mm round bead, and it really worked the best. First, 6mm is just big enough that you feel like you can get a grip on it. It being round also works with this design that I'm going to show you how you mix and match your millimeters to get it sit up like that. I also tried this flat coin bead, and I found that being that it was flat on one side, it was really hard to get it level. You're going to see that something is not level if your stone is flat. So I think the round stone works the best. And I tried it with a pearl and kind of squishing the surrounding to meet the size of this pearl. But obviously we all know that pearls, the holes are extremely small. I had to use 26 gauge, and then when I went to go form it, the 26 gauge has a really hard time locking in the wraps as you start to pull it around the ring mandrel. So I really felt like a 6mm round bead worked the best. Usually by that size, a dead soft 20 gauge can fit in that hole, and it's really going to lock in your bead. Plus it gives a lovely accent of the wraps on the side, and then the round bead. You're not going to see if anything is kind of not level. Plus, I think this stone is a little jacked as well. Here is another successful one where I used a round bead and it just fit in there lovely. This one's slightly smaller. I believe this was around 5mm into 4mm surrounding. That is what we're going to talk about right now when we get started on this form. I've got some 6mm African turquoise beads that I'm going to use. Turquoise goes so well with copper, so we're going to work with that today. Being that it's 6mm, I am going to use the 5mm bail on my pliers. So that is going to prevent the stone from collapsing down inside the form. It'll make it sit on top. I did have that one somewhere. I have no idea where the one that went that I started with, say, the opening is 6mm and I used a 6mm bead. It just fell down in the opening and didn't work quite as well. I really like this look. So for this 6mm bead, I'm going to use the 5mm bail. We're going to take our bail pliers. We're going to roughly find the middle. A little side note, you can get away with 10 inches of wire if you've got if you're making a small ring. 12 inches is probably going to do you just about any ring size. And we're just forming around the 5mm bail. We're going to crisscross, bring it down nice and tight around that bail. I'm pressing nice and firmly, and then just keep on pressing. So we've got it like this. And I'm checking to make sure everything is sitting tight together. I want to show you something. As you are pressing around, if you can take an extra step just to make sure that it's all nice and level and a wire's not coming out slightly, this most slightly little bit will make this stack not line up properly. So if you take just a few seconds just to make sure it's level before you bend around, that's really going to help you in the end. Now that we've got our sweet little loop that is going to be encapsulating our bead, I'm just going through if I see anything that is maybe not lined up properly or could use the slightest tweak, and I'm taking time now to fix it before I move on, and just going slow and taking my time. There's nothing more irritating. You spend all this time on something and you feel, wow, that did not work because this was wonky. Take your time and make it right. All right, now we're going to work through these side arms here. That will come around and then eventually make the loops around our ring mandrel. Now the way I had looped this around the bail pliers, it works out that when I hold it like this, one of the wires is coming on the bottom here. That is fine. That's actually the way I like to hold my pliers with the wire. I can just slide that right in there. These are some really sweet tweezer nose pliers from Xuron that work well for this. And I'm just kind of envisioning where that sidearm is going to be coming out. Grabbing this firmly and then just twist out. Oh my gosh, did you see the handles coming off? I'm going to have to fix that. I'm going to try to do it. Okay. Oh, look what I did doing that. Now that might happen to you because I got this sliding. Oh my goodness. They've got a lot of use. So, and I just took my pliers right in there and squeezed it back together. No problem whatsoever. Actually, I think I need to bend it out some more. I don't think I got it out enough. Everything was sliding around, wasn't it? And I think I'm going to adjust this again. That sliding of the handle on my pliers really messed it up. You know, that stuff happens. Fortunately, wire is so forgiving and you can just make it work again. And I'm just making sure this is nice and level and it's nice and flat. These little stacks of wraps are sitting nicely together. And now we're going to put the other bend in. I'm going to adjust again because now I think I've got it too much. Just doing tweaks here. I'm going to grab my Sharpie. Always have a Sharpie handy. It's so useful in jewelry making. And I'm just going to eyeball this. I'm just going to march across here and make a little mark where the other side is. The first one doesn't matter so much because it's the first one, but we want the other side to match. Same thing, I've got this wrap on the bottom. It makes it easy for me to put my hand like this on the bottom side and position my pliers just on the outside, not on the dot. Not on the dot because the bend happens just on the outside of the end of the pliers. So if I were to bend it here, it's going to bend too high. So I want to just put it on the outside of that mark. Grab firmly again and twist as my pliers handle moves again. And there you see that that twist is coming out from the mark. Perfect. Doing some more tweaks, doing some checks before we go to the next stage. Now this next part is not fully, well, you got to do it. If you don't do it, it's the end of the world. It's just my kind of nitpicky self where I don't like how this arm is going to be eventually sitting closer to your finger or sitting closer to the ring mandrel as you're working. I want them both to be in line with each other, if that makes sense. So I take one little extra step to make them line up. And you'll see me do this when we did several videos ago. We did one on hoop earrings. I can't stand it when they're not in line when it comes to the wrap at the top. And so I'll do something similar in that video as well to make them line up. And I'm just going to bend this directly down. And a 90-degree angle. Make sure my loop is not coming out of whack here. And then it's the same principle that we just did with the black mark. I want the bend to occur where this bottom loop is, if I can say that. So I'm going to come out just to the side of it, right? Not snug, just a little bit to the side of it. Holding this firmly, I'm going to be pressing everything together as I do this to get that bend in there sitting next to the loop. Now at this point, I'm going to be making some more adjustments so I can get these sitting more in the center of our loop. Now I have done many of these rings, had no glitches whatsoever. But when that handle slid off, it has caused a major glitch. But you know, I'm going to show you how you can work through it. How you can just keep working and you can make it work. Keep working that wire. Keep bending that wire until it's where it is supposed to be. Do not move on.
Later.
And now here we have our form that is going to be holding our bead and making this ring. And these arms are in line. Do you need to absolutely do that? No, but you know, if you're like me, you're kind of picky. Now we're going to wrap our beads. Now I mentioned that I felt like 20 gauge worked the best to really anchor in the bead as we're wrapping around the ring mandrel. I did not see if this fit, but usually if you're up and around in the 6mm range, you're going to find that 20 gauge is going to fit that. Got my 20 gauge dead soft here. I'm going to wipe down my wire before I cut. I always do this. Help remove any excess tarnish.
Where did my flush cutters go?
Over here. And I cut roughly 4 inches. Okay. Let's see what that is. Is it 4 inches? Is it 4 inches? Oh man. Look how close I was. Whew. Maybe next time. Still not an absolute winner. I don't need to flush cut that because we're going to be trimming anyway. It's a habit, you know, it's a good habit to get into, but I don't need to do it right. I'm going to grab one. Let's see one that I might like. I think I want to go with this lightest one here. Slip that bead on. Right there in the center of the wrapping wire. Adjust your wire so you get some equal parts on the sides to work with. Now you see how now of course the wire sitting against the loop is working as well, but let me show you without the wire. You see how that did not fall through and it's sitting up like the sweetest little center of a Like, oh my gosh, like the sweetest little center of a flower. And that's what we're going for. I want to just show you, prove to you that that works like that. We're using a 6mm bead with a 5mm opening, and you will get that kind of look. Now, if you wanted to sit down a little further into your opening of the ring, this is totally up to you. Go with that 6mm opening. Go a little bigger if you really want some movement, you want to stick some little seed beads in there or something. This is totally your preference. I do find that, where's this one? This one was slightly smaller. I think it was 5mm. It was a little harder to grasp. That's the only thing I felt. I thought 6mm worked really well. Now that we've got the base to our ring, we can start putting in our wraps that's going to hold this stone in place. And I usually go for about 3. You could do just 2, or you could go up to 4 or 5. That is totally your preference of the look that you're going for. I typically do 3. Now, if this was a lighter gauge, this would definitely be a little easier, but I explained to you a little while ago why I do like to use 20 gauge for this. It's a ring. It's going to be taking, you know, a lot of abuse on your hands, and I did not like it with the lighter gauges. I did not try 22 gauge, I will say that. So I am using some pliers to help me get this wire around. Hey, you got to use it when you got to use it. I'm going to just turn this around, and we're going to have a mirror image that will end up being opposite. And we'll have a little more strength because of that. And I'm going to put in our 3 matching wraps. And I'm keeping these wraps, can I say parallel to the stone? Or perpendicular to this base wire, however you want to say it, so that you don't want them to start going like this, and then they're not as strong that way, and it takes up a lot of room on your base wire. So that's what I'm going for. You see how, and they're nice and tightly stacked. And I should have some matching ones on either side. Now, you see it's gotten a little, you know, it's not straight anymore. That's all right. I'm going to put my pliers right in. I'm going to press on this wire as well that's coming out of the wrap, or coming out of the stone, and press it with the wrap there, and it will kind of straighten that out and tighten it as well. I'm going to turn it over and do the same thing. Make any adjustments that we need to make now before we start putting in those wraps on our mandrel. I'm looking at the underside. I'm looking at this alignment as well. If I needed to make any adjustments, this is the time to do it for sure. Being really gentle too, because all it takes is one hard press and it's wonkyville. I think that's going to work so far. So now I'm going to trim. Grab your chain nose pliers. We're just going to tuck those ends in. There's different rules of thought, different schools of thought on where to cut your wire on a ring. I have heard many times to cut it so that it's sitting on the top. I don't quite understand that. That doesn't make sense to me when you can just take your file, whatever that you like to use or have on hand, and file it smooth and hide the end. Why would you want the end where you could see it? So I always tuck in my ends on rings on the bottom side and just file it smooth. And that's smooth. That's smooth. So I don't understand the school of thought of wrapping it and ending it on the top. Pinch these together. Being very gentle here so I don't mush or lose my shape. I'm going to see if I can bring these wraps in a little tighter to the stone. This is not necessary as well. I just want to see if I can. I think I got a little bit there. It's not like you're going to be able to see, but I get a little picky. I get a little maniacal with the little details. If you're having a hard time trying to envision, is it lined up? Is it not? Get your ruler or some other type of straight edge and you can put this whole unit up against the edge to see, is that straight? You know, with all the wraps and the different lines that are going on, sometimes it plays tricks on your mind and it's hard to tell, is this straight? So you can just, and that tells me that that's looking pretty good before we start wrapping, because once you start getting it around the ring mandrel, you can forget that. It's going to be a whole lot harder. That's all I'm saying. Now, I have super tiny fingers, so I'm going to go for a 5. Plus, it might make it a little easier to show you if I'm here at the end of this ring mandrel. It's hard to see the the numbers as well. That's one thing I would do different if I got another ring mandrel, is got one where I could actually see the numbers. I did put Sharpie down in them at one point, but it just rubs away. Get it right on wherever size that you're choosing. Slowly, gently press around. One's naturally going to go over top. One is naturally going to come to the bottom. When they start coming around back to the front, whichever one is going to the front needs to, or stay on top, needs to stay on top. The one on the bottom needs to stay on the bottom, even when it comes back around again. Keep on going, keeping that, and keeping your stone there on the 5. And wrap again, crossing over in the back. Making sure they're not crossed over. We like, just like I said, top needs to stay on the top, bottom one needs to stay on the bottom. And I think that will work. At this point, we can take it off the ring mandrel. We're going to flip around to this back side. This is where we're going to put these in. This is going to lock it in. This is also where you can adjust your size as well. Say if you get it wrapped around, you're like, oh, it needs to be even smaller. You can put more wraps in here to, it takes up real estate. You know, it takes up room on the center of this ring and will make it smaller. This ring feels really good on your hand as well. You see how there's a little bend in this one right here? I just want to straighten that out a little bit. And that's so easy with these tweezer nose pliers. Take this 4. It's still not. It's still, you're going to see it. Now, when that happened, I'm not sure. Just go slow and gentle when you're making those wraps. Maybe I went too fast. Bring them together and pinch with a pair of your chain nose pliers. Now, where do we pinch? Okay, so I look straight through the wraps and I'm looking beyond to where the stone is. And that's where we want to pinch so that we get those wraps, those bottom wraps positioned centrally. And bring it close to the jaw of your pliers to really hold it tightly. The more you can get it close to down in here, the tighter your grip will be on this. I'm checking all this before I start wrapping. I'm thinking I'm liking the way it's lining up. You can take another pair of chain nose pliers and help yourself pinch that together if you need that. That's going to help a little bit. Now, while you're still holding really tightly, bend one wire out like this, straight up. Still holding really tightly. Bend this one straight back. And I'm looking to see if they're kind of level. And you see I'm going super slow. I'm not rushing this. Unless this is your first time. Do you ever get like, I just want to see how it works. I just want to do it. And you rush through it and you're like, okay, I got it. I see what works and didn't work. Now I'm going to take my time. You can do that too. I give you permission to do that too. Sometimes I just want to get my feet wet. I just want to jump in. I want to do it. I want to make a whole bunch of mess ups and then go back in and say, okay, that didn't work and that didn't work. And that's how that worked. It's almost like an experiment. You can do that too. I'm going to straighten this out while I'm here as best as I can, because this is going to become our wraps, and we want this orderly, nice and neat and orderly. About 2 centimeters seem to give me enough of wrap to get these final wraps in, so I can kind of see where I want to cut that. I did bad. I did not hold my finger on that. That's a bad example. Do not follow that example. That was really bad. I was supposed to put my finger on there and catch that. And I'm taking the end of that wire and curling it in. Pulling it out the other side. Let me turn it sideways so you can see me pinch this down and lock it in. I want to straighten this up, get it more in line with that first wrap. Bring it over a little bit. And then lay that down right next to the first one. Always taking time to straighten. Now, I would not be holding this exactly like this if I wasn't showing you. I want you to see what I'm doing. So you don't have to hold it just exactly like I am. Hold it how it works for you. Okay, and you see I took that off and it's in place. This needs to come together before we wrap it together. Holding it really tightly, and I'm just going to guess it like that 2 centimeters. Okay, it was a good girl that time, so it doesn't go flying. Sometimes I just like to hear it fly across the room, okay? I'm making sure this is nice and straight before I get started, just grabbing that end with my pliers and start curling it in, directing it back through the center of the ring. Let me show you what I'm doing here. I'm going to clamp that down. Watching what these wires are doing here, these bands, I should say. Really watching that. We can come back and make some minor adjustments in a little bit. I'm going to tuck this back closer to the jaw. It's a little bit tighter there. I'm going to see if I can just straighten that out just ever so slightly. You can also put the one side of your pliers on the other pliers as a brace as well. And then get that final wrap in there. I've got a little bit of excess, so I'm just going to bend it out ever so slightly once again and trim that off. Any adjustments, tightening up. And see how this is kind of, one side is, I don't know, angled up or something? You can take your pliers and you just press against it and line it up so it sits nice and flat. And I want to pull this out just a little bit so they're sitting evenly. I'm liking how that's looking. Let me grab my file and I'm going to come back down on the inside of this ring and clean it up. Nice and smooth, no roughness whatsoever. And just tuck this one together too. We want it to look nice on the inside of the ring as well. One last step to do is put it back on the ring mandrel. And look, it sits right on the 5. Isn't that amazing? As long as you get it on there, where the size right there in the beginning, it'll work. It's wanting to push this wire on this side underneath the stone just because it's tapered, you know. So I'm just kind of hold it there, grab your nylon hammer, and we're going to strengthen the shank of this ring. Gently on the wraps. I'll do those too, but just very gently. I got my lower wrap bands here a little out of sync, a little off center, but I don't think it matters in the grand scheme of things. Isn't that just cute and lovely? I think I need to do my middle finger. Yes, fits better on my middle finger. Just really sweet, really lovely. Great with your 6mm beads in a 5mm setting. Remember some of the pitfalls that I had. I needed to use a stone, a big enough hole to accommodate 20, maybe 22 gauge, to really hold in the stone, in the wraps. As you start to form it around the ring mandrel, you want it to be able to hold. Plus the rings, they're going to take a beating. I also did not find that a flat coin stone worked well either. I think because of there's 2 stacks on one and then 1 single stack on the other, and it just tends to make it want to look like it's lopsided, and you're not going to get that with a round stone. So go for a 6mm round stone. What do these look like when they're stacked? I think maybe you could even stack those. Ew. Yeah. Really, really lovely. I say lovely a lot, don't I? There is a lot of lovely things in life. You just have to be able to look for them. Have the patience to see them. If you want to do some sanding on these, because you might be, especially like something like this African turquoise, I would never put that in the tumbler. I have a feel like that was just break into a million pieces. There are these radial discs that come in different grits. They're great for intricate things like this, or just rings in general. Another thing is really good is these silicone silicone polishing set. I mean, look at these great little pieces. Oh my, that could get that can get on the inside of your ring and really polish up and smooth up the inside of your ring. So I have those linked below so you can just check them out, see if you're interested. I love these. These could be slightly better in quality, but they get the job done. You know, you run through them anyway, but they're great, really great. And it tells you what the grit is on there. And the same way with these silicone polishers, coarse all the way to extra fine, kind of tells you in this little diagram here. So, and it comes with all the pieces that you need to attach to your Dremel or whatever you are using, and they're definitely will bring your piece up to the next level. If you can't use the tumbler, you know, if you've got something like this going on and you can't use the tumbler, got to have something else to polish your pieces. I hope you have fun making these rings. They are some kind of cute. Last little tip is just go slow. Take your time to straighten out anything that looks wonky before you go to the next step. As always, I've had a great time, as I always do, and I look forward to seeing you again next week for Tutorial Tuesday.